intersection, advocacy and power. And I thought, well, I need someone to meet me at the intersection to have this conversation. And, Kelly, of course, came to mind because of her long history in activism and justice work. And where I wanted to go with this topic, I knew she would be able to go and maybe even stretch me. So, and probably I should say stretch me. So I thought that this would be a really good way to handle this session. So it will be, conversation like excuse me, it will be recorded, and I do not have a PowerPoint, but I might make one afterwards. Just so that you have that for those of you who like that. But I didn't want to create another distraction, and also didn't want to give too much of a script. Um, for Kelly and I wanted us to be able to go where we're going to go in this conversation. I will say that where I would like us to go, and I think obviously we want to talk about advocacy and power in terms of our spirituality, in terms of ministry, and there's so much to cover with that. But I want to spend this time really getting to the heart of what it means to be at the intersection of advocacy and power, because that word power is one of our 12 powers. It also, there's abusive power that is relevant to the topic of advocacy. There's also empowerment and being empowered. So there's a lot to work with that. But I want to really kind of get behind all of that and into what motivates us into advocacy, what gets us fired up. And a lot of times it's anger or fear or things that we don't like to spend a lot of time really working through spiritually. And so in order for us to engage in the work of activism and justice, even to have conversations and to be with those ideas in the spiritual realm, I think it's really important for us to make a practice and comfort of being with those feelings and with those kinds of motivators. They aren't the only motivators. Deep love can be a really important and powerful motivator as well. And I would like us to kind of cover two. There's the self advocacy, there's the relational advocacy, and there's of course, the cosmic or macro advocacy, what happens like in systems, and all of that touches ministry, whatever kind of ministry or work you do. So that's kind of the vibe that I'm hoping that we kind of create today. And Kelly, first, I think everyone here knows you. This is Reverend Kelly Isola, the divine. One of my dear friends refers to her as the Kelly app, because you just ask her a question and she gives you an answer, and is a brilliant woman and minister. And I would love for you, Kelly, to share a little bit about your work with Project Sanctus, or whatever you want to share about your ministry work. And then let's dive in.
Uh, well, the first thing I'll say is I'm a free range minister. So I don't, while I have served churches here and there, mostly after disasters, largely my work for 15 years has been at large. So, and working with churches around the globe. A good chunk of, and my, the way I serve comes in a lot of different forms. One of the biggest forms is embodied anti-racism, which you can learn more about that at Project Sanctus that Jackie mentioned, and I just put a link in the chat. But with my partner, Reverend Ogun Holder. And so while, it's embodied anti-racism, we're really looking at systems of oppression in whatever form, because there's kind of a starting point of patriarchy and privilege, and that the country is built on, and therefore we've developed lots of ways to marginalize people. So my work is podcasting and writing and workshops and developing curriculum and affinity groups, which I think is one of the most important ways that white folks need, that I think every white person should be in an affinity group, because it takes a lifetime to witness your own whiteness and continue to see how you engage in propping up systems of oppression. But that's that's my PSA. So anyway, we have 2 groups a month, affinity groups, and And then doing things like this when someone asks, or at a regional conference, or wherever within Unity and outside of Unity, as well with nonprofits. I do a lot. A lot of my work is interfaith. I've been engaged in interfaith work for 30 years. So it seems that you can talk about patriarchy and systems of oppression pretty much anywhere, not just Unity. And one of the big things that Ogun and I also focus on is the privilege in New Thought, which isn't really comfortable for most people.
So let's get uncomfortable then. When I think about advocacy and just in my own life, how I have shown up as an advocate, times that I have needed an advocate, it gets very personal very quickly. And so it's often related to, painful experiences or experiences where I or have felt disempowered or have witnessed other people feeling disempowered, whether that's through discrimination, oppression, violence, or, more aggressive types of experiences. Um, and I'm, full disclosure, I'm a double Sagittarius. I'm a 7 on the Enneagram with an 8 wing. So when I get fired up, I get fired up. And bringing that into a spiritual realm and environment, can be uncomfortable, especially in a spiritual community that seems to have an allergy to anger and can make that the focus as opposed to the issue or the problem or the opportunity. What do you think about that?
Well, there was like 8 things in there. Uh, well, uh, since you mentioned anger, right? Did I hear you say anger?
Yeah.
Because sometimes I think I hear things and I'm like, I think I filtered it into the word I think I hear. So yeah, so starting with anger, my experience has been that within spiritual communities, it's a no-no. Like if you're angry, then we make up what that means and why you shouldn't be. And I one of the things that my partner and I, my business partner and I, work at and talk about and workshop and things is the relationship between love and anger, and that anger is not necessarily a bad thing. It tells me that there's something alive there, right? It's um, um, it's this anger is really this tension that we experience between when we are hurt and we're trying to find a strategy of self-care to take care of the hurt. And in trying to find a strategy to take care of the hurt, the hurt just, you know, um, as believe it or not, Charles Fillmore uses the term, you're boiling your corpuscles. I know it's disgusting, but it's an interesting picture to, boiling your corpuscles when it gets overboard and the anger has us, right? As opposed to me having the anger, harnessing the anger, using the anger. And, if I'm trying to find a strategy of self-care to take care of the hurt that initiated, you know, it building to anger, um, the more that I can't find a strategy, or I don't know, or I'm not reaching out, then it grows and it becomes the tension grows and the rigidity grows, and then it becomes we wind up expressing aggression, right? Then we wind up expressing rage. Sometimes we use rage and anger interchangeably, but I think they're um, when we lose ourselves in the anger, then it becomes rage. So coming back to the anger is a incredibly, it actually tells me that love lives there. If I didn't care about something, or if there wasn't love living there, then I wouldn't. I'd be okay, whatever. But in my desire to find a strategy for self-care, in my desire also it's about protecting myself. Um, I know and so in doing that, and actually when we engage the anger, rather than trying to push it away, when we embrace it and bring it home, then you actually can use it. It's energy that when harnessed, it's passion, it's power, it's strength. It doesn't have to become "you done me wrong," or your or name calling, but yet it becomes a foundation, a powerful place to stand to advocate. Because advocacy doesn't have to be. I think sometimes advocacy can be thought of as, well, we have to be kind and we have to be not, but there. I'm not saying don't be kind, but you can be kind and powerful at the same time. MLK's quote about power and love, right? Power without love is oppression, and love without power is just sentimentality. So it's having both. And I think anger is a place to, it's one of those emotions, one of those when we harness it, right? When we learn to manage our emotion, actually transform it and use it for doing something different, for advocating, whether it's an individual, right, like I'm advocating for me, or an entire organization, or my group of people, or my family, or whomever.
Yeah, I love that. It makes me think about when you talk about the difference between anger and rage. Um, for someone who has an allergy to anger, or who is triggered by anger, or has experienced maybe, say, in family of origin, there's more rage than anger. So when they witness someone else getting angry, they are then triggered and maybe even experience it as rage, or feel as though that they're witnessing rage. And I feel like maybe that's sometimes what happens. Like you said, it's a no-no in spiritual circles. Um, Anything that is like a slippery slope, we just want to reject and cut off. And so what do you think is the opportunity between anger and rage, but also bearing witness to it?
Are you asking me or everybody?
You. So
Oh,
this will be a conversation between us.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So can you say that again?
Yeah, so I'm just thinking about the opportunity between anger and rage. And so as for someone who may witness anger, and that is can be triggering, just maybe is not able to hold space for that, because maybe the life experience is that anger always becomes rage, which may become then abuse or violence. Or and maybe a bigger question is, how do we just hold space in spiritual community, and anywhere really, but especially in spiritual community, for anger? How do we hold space for that? And that even that there are times when rage is the appropriate response.
Right. Well, there is, I mean, my relationship with anger and rage has, evolved over the years. I grew up in a home where the only emotion that was allowed to be expressed was rage, and the only person allowed to express it was my father. So what I discovered, the message I kind of grew up with was be strong, be good, be a good girl, and shut up. Right. And so moving into adulthood, and and then through addiction, and then finally getting clean, it was, changing my relationship with anger took some time. I had to, by learning to, um, really notice when I was angry, and kind of, I had to take my ego to therapy. So I could learn that when I got angry and I'm triggered or activated, to not be the 5-year-old and just lash out. I mean, that's what I had done. It's a really good practice if I want to keep people out here, which was a strategy for a long time because I had lots of abuse in my life, some of it very violent. And so having to learn, it just took a while. I had to learn, I had to practice. I literally had to practice um, expressing anger without uh, dismantling you, without pulling out my fillet knife, and you know, and sarcasm was a huge tool. I'm pretty sarcastic, and it's a violent tool. The word itself, the etymology of the word sarcasm, literally means ripping flesh. So I learned to express the anger because I'm shorter than people and I'm not going to physically beat you up, but I could certainly dismantle you with, particular words. So for me, it was a while of building a relationship with anger. What did it mean? How did I define it? Where does it fit in my world? How do I make it fit in my world? And not run from it. And interestingly, you use the word holding a space for it. I think sometimes we use holding as a bypass. Um, not always, as opposed to um, what we really want to be doing is noticing the anger, allowing it to have some space, and not reacting to it. But it's that was just I had to practice that, and I had to be willing to make mistakes, and I practiced on the people kind of closest to me, because they're the ones that if I, you know, kind of they didn't know I was practicing on them, but I'm trying to learn how to express the emotion, express my anger, not be like about it as opposed to through it. So I had to practice that, and of course, I wasn't graceful at all as I practiced because what I would get back from somebody, and again, I just did it with people close to me, would be like, "What the fuck? Why are you picking on me?" Like, "Rah," I'd get back the same shit I was throwing. So, feedback's very helpful. But having to really address the roots of, so if anger is its origin is in being hurt and trying to find a self-care practice, then that's what I did. So I'm creating self-care practices, and then it moves into a space of I can be angry and without attacking you, without vomiting on you. Um, I also had to really do a lot of somatic work, like where in my body do I feel the anger and where does it show up? And then have conversations. When I would feel angry, stopping, again, a lot of practice, a lot of habits. Um, where in my body am I feeling it? Right? Is it here in the chest? Is it my hips? Is it my head? Like it's in a vice. And whenever I would find the place where I could feel it, being in a conversation. Okay, if it's in my head, like my head's in a vice, okay, what do you need? Right? Um, but the biggest thing is always, and that's part of that self-care, right? So anger comes about a result of that tension of being hurt and trying to find a way to care for that, um, and not finding something. So it just continues to build. I had to, you know, even just hearing the words, like when I first started, okay, got to take this on, need to learn. Um, it really was it began as advocating for me. That was part of my self care, like speaking up for me and learning when you would say the word anger or rage, and I could feel my body go, "Oh, somebody change the subject quick, you know. No, no, it's or if I felt somebody's energy and made it mean that they were angry, like me backing, okay, gotta go. Um, and how am I being around when somebody's angry, right? And how do I struggle with it? And noticing how someone else struggles with it. Because once this is part of it's also not to get too like brainiac about it, but it's developing our emotional intelligence, managing our emotions, and we learn to help others, right? Like how am I being with others and helping them manage their emotions? Um, Looking at how I've hurt people with my anger, like the sarcasm thing, how I've hurt myself. Like that's a self-care practice. I've hurt myself with anger. I shut you out. I go eat. I lots of ways that I can put up a wall. And so having to acknowledge that it's a really big bucket. Um, but I had to take it in order to use the energy of anger or rage and use the power of it, but shift it into, using it as opposed to using it for evil, using it for good, right? Not necessarily evil's the right word, but you get the idea. Is in order to do that transformation, I had to look at my relationship with anger. So I got to take it out of the abstract and move it into very concrete. And the way that I move it into very concrete is all the things that I said. And it starts, if I'm going to, advocate with power, with strength, with zeal, right? For a group, for a policy, and you're going to hear my voice. It doesn't mean I'm not loud, but I'm not abusive, right? And I'm not harming anyone.
Yeah, you kind of brought it into what I'm thinking about too, is like, so power. You mentioned power. There is power in anger and in rage. There's also power in love. There's power in the experience of being hurt. So that's a lot of energy that we are moving. And I just second that, the opportunity of doing somatic work. Like I feel like every everybody on the planet, because that is our body temple, is our interface between our divine, soul and our physical bodies, and how we experience life on the earth. And so really getting in touch and making it, that concrete, as you say, it to me is a path for healing, is a very important path for it, and healing, and being. um, so when I say holding space, I'm talking about giving space or being with,
Yeah,
um, and which I think is, what you're saying too. And also I'm glad you mentioned that that can be a spiritual bypass, because we're, I think, so prone to that,
yeah,
especially around the topics of anger, rage, power, and even advocacy and justice work. My favorite sort of, trend that has been going on in justice circles and justice workers circles, for several years now, is about self care. It's just what you're talking about, that, justice work is not, a sprint, it's a marathon. And, if you want to continue in the marathon, you have to take care of yourself. You have to, mind the business of your body and your mind and your heart and your soul and your spirit and all of those things. So thank you for presencing that. um,
we have a Ogan and I have a our sort of tagline, and what foundation of our work is rest, restore, repair, resist.
yes.
And people sometimes, what do you mean resist? What you resist persists. That's in consciousness.
Yeah.
We're talking about resist here in the real world. You
Yeah.
better believe there's an element of resist in advocacy.
Yeah. Yes.
It's rest, restore, repair, resist. Unless and until I do the other ones, I'm no good
Hmm.
at the resist.
And that's it, about being an effective advocate, right? So you can advocate for something by going in, you know
Yeah,
in rage, and, and say all the things, and that's not going to be effective, you
right.
know so I think, what you're describing is that, the inner work of that, of knowing how to be angry, knowing how to be, in the presence of others who are angry, and managing your own being in that. um, all of that are like the building blocks of then how to go forward in advocacy. And so let's bring power into that, because it is one of our 12 powers, right? Um, and so much of advocacy and justice work is about abuse of power. That's what is causing the harm and the hurt. In, I don't know, I could say 100% of the cases, and maybe there are some that that's not it, but in some way, shape, or form, I think it can be distilled down to that. So how do we work with that? And what do you think about, when you think about power in justice work? And even and if you want to pick it up right from the conversation about anger, um, how power is working in us.
Um, I over the years, what I've noticed in New Thought and mostly Unity is actually an aversion to power, more of an aversion than claiming, or I'm not even going to say affirming. I like to say assert. I think assertion is much more powerful than affirm. Um, like we talk about denials and affirmations. I'd rather denial and an assertion because there's just more power in it. I mean, even when you say the word, I think that I say unity, is very much has been almost unapologetic. I mean, we have these things out now that say unapologetically inclusive, yet the movement itself, for me, in my experience, is largely apologetic. Like we don't want to stand too strong on something. We don't want to be too vocal. We don't want to be too loud. We don't want to piss somebody off. We want to make sure that everyone knows they're welcome everywhere, even though we don't really do that. We strive to, we think we are. And I'm not trying to dog on anyone. It's just that's my experience. And I know we want our world to not be that way. And yet it is. So power, I think it's one of the saddest things to me is because I think it's one of the greatest one of the one of our, it's one of the 12 powers, something that we don't harness in its full capacity as much as we can. And what I mean by that is that, we teach in Unity that, there's divine nature and divine identity. And our divine nature is that, we are principle, right? I'm fully human and I'm fully divine. And but we kind of have relegated being fully human, like there's too many unconscious unexamined assumptions that that means like not a good thing. Like I don't want to, my humanness got in the way. Well, I know what you mean is that you weren't having a good day and you got in your own way. For me, the reality is that your humanness is one of your greatest tools. Like that's how we bring our divine nature forward. That's our divine identity. And so, moment to moment, choice by choice, we bring our divine identity forward. And part of our divine identity is power. I mean, this is not for the faint of heart. Unity teachings are not for the faint of heart. They're not unicorn pink frosting. They are really designed to, fry your brain, turn you inside out, um, and get up off your affirmations and do something, right? It's not all the time. Our life is always a dance between contemplation and being in action, right? Of doing and being. So power is, we have this immense power, and I think we're just afraid to use it. I at times. And I think like I know for me, when I first, heard that and was first learning that, it actually scared me because I was equating it to anger. I was thinking when I see somebody powerful, there's going to be all this like anger or rage. And I had to learn that, yes, that's true. Sometimes we're watching it now, play out all around us. And where are the people that it's not about power over, it's about power with. So somebody like Martin Luther King Jr., just good example. He was quite vocal, he was quite loud, he had lots of opinions, there was a lot of power behind what he said, and it wasn't any, he said it like it was. People did not enjoy what he said, and he said it. He said what was true, and lots of white folks got uncomfortable. That's my job. I need to make white people uncomfortable. That's how you change a system. Um, It's not their fault, right? I didn't create the system of oppression, and I have the power to use my privilege to dismantle it. And rather than trying to, move it to the side, shift from power over, and I have to learn what that is, right? I have to learn how I demonstrate power over every day, not when or if, but how, to power with. And power with is about the voices I should be lifting up are the Black transgender women. When those voices are lifted, everybody's voices are lifted. So where am I using this power that I have of my divine nature that lives out through my humanity as my divine identity, and not shy away from claiming my humanity? I mean, it's the tool you have. Like, what other tool is at your disposal besides being human? And the power that we have, it makes me uh like, it excites me, it energizes me, and sometimes I feel sad because we're not doing that. And I know I'm not all the time, but is power is a good thing. Just we have to move our consciousness to um, power with each of you here, power with whoever I am. And sometimes that means being silent, and sometimes it means being very loud. We lost somebody, didn't we?
I think so.
Oh, I drove them away.
Yes. No, they might have just dropped. I'll see. I'll check and see if they come back in.
It's the same invitation with power. Like, what am I avoiding? Like, when you hear the word power, what comes up? Like, honestly, what comes up? Where in my body do I feel it? Where's the discomfort? When and also where in my body do I feel it that I can go, yeah, and like expand that, not to move into having power over or taking control, but to you know, to move, Teilhard's quote about the power that moves the stars and the planets is the same power that moves the human heart.
Mhm.
And I completely agree with that. Um, we have our teachings that support us in transforming, you know, we don't want to boil our corpuscles, but transform that energy into um, taking a stand. Myrtle Fillmore said, if I speak truth and I don't do truth, then I'm silent.
Mhm.
If I speak truth, but I don't do truth, then I'm silent. I don't want to be silent.
Yeah,
Oh,
she's back.
she's back.
Yay. You know, I think what you're just talking about is so important. Like, I almost now like I'm envisioning teaching the 12 powers through the body. Um,
Yes.
because if like you said, it's not, to like check in, where does power, where do you feel that in your body? Just saying the word or hearing the word. Um, and it's not to do power over, but that's, I think, probably where most of us go, and I
Yes.
can only speak from my context to generalize that. So I just presence that. But I think that that's probably where most of us, or at least a lot of us, go. um, and so if we don't sit with that and recognize that and become aware of that, we can't change that. And then unpack and I don't know, pull apart that relationship between power and power over. We've got to really do the work of unpacking that just in our own body so that we can
Mhm.
truly be in power with that you're describing.
Well, justice is loaded with power.
Hmm.
I think, my experience, that most of us were raised, and our culture, unconsciously unexamined assumptions, that when we say power, our mind and our body kind of flashes to the times that someone has had power over me.
Hmm.
Certainly, if you're in a marginalized,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
marginalized group, a marginalized community, that's how power translates. Um, and even not, I mean, I think most of us may have grown up with some adult that was, children should be seen and not heard. That's a power over thing,
Hmm.
right? And I don't know if you've ever sat, I'll confess, there has been a board meeting a time or two over the years where I look at somebody and I think, you should be seen and not heard. I'll confess.
I will neither deny or confirm.
I won't tell. Um, and I think it's the building how do I have a relationship with power, right? Really learning what the power of power is. And I don't think it's, I think there's an assumption on what it means. And I don't know that we ever spend time really thinking about it and how do we use it and how do you use it? How do you use power powerfully,
Mm,
so to speak?
right.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, there's power in love, there's power in truth, there's power in faith, there's power in power. Like we feed, it's almost like we dance around the actual power,
yep.
and try to get there in pretty ways, right? In spiritually appropriate ways, and thereby we just reduce power,
Yes.
right? We hide next to it instead of being in and with it.
Well, and other ways, and other ways to think about power, the power of power, is that one, like come back to self, right? Part of that advocacy and self advocacy, and that my anger begins as hurt, and then I'm looking for self care practice to, you know, to heal the hurt. Um, that's all, part of self mastery. Self mastery is power, right? So the more I have mastery of my emotions, of my thoughts, of my body, right? There's four functions of consciousness, right? Thinking, feeling, sensing the body, and intuiting. At self mastery of those four elements of my consciousness is power. And the more I develop that, the more powerful I am, but not the way we've usually been taught. Like we equate power to authority. And I don't know about your experience, but Unity has an allergy to words like authority, discipline, policy, responsibility, accountability, right? So part of self mastery is accountability. So there's a maturation process that has to go on. Um, and so if we're gonna, so needing to make peace with the words like authority,
Hmm.
Unity's tagline is "You can't make me. You're not the boss of me." Um, so even whether individually, collectively, the whole church, you're wherever you are, is understanding the relationship to power. Um, and oh, by the way, we were created for it. It's one of our capacities. It's one of we can use it to um, Charles Fillmore said, there's one power and it can be used two ways, right? We can destroy or we can build up. So, not a mystery. I just don't know that we really want to own it.
Right. Well, and it's so interesting too because the destroying, I mean, sometimes that's the right way forward, right?
Yes, but he
Destroy
the way
is not
he
always the bad way or the misused way, right?
yes,
Sometimes that
yes,
is the actual constructive way is to destruct or destroy, right?
yes, right. And what he used the word evil. So
Yeah.
he's when he talks about using power for evil, to
Yeah.
um, I don't disagree. I think part of advocacy, a big part of advocacy, and why it can be a struggle in spiritual communities is because we have to tear down.
Hmm.
We have to hospice modernity. And
Hmm.
that takes sustained power,
Hmm.
right? That takes sustained self mastery. That takes sustained um, transforming anger to love, and love that, not the sentimental kind, but love that is in action.
Yes. In ministry of any kind, I think there are always opportunities to engage in advocacy, whether it's for self, for an individual, or to really tap into the more systemic issues and opportunities. And I, there are also boundaries that need to be placed around that, right? For what is a minister's role or even a community member's role. to take in that. So I'm thinking of like a real specific on the ground thing. A congregant gets moved into assisted living. Lots of opportunities for advocacy in that situation, and maybe they don't have family. And where, where is it the spiritual community's role to participate in that? Where is it ours to connect with other groups that can be more intimately engaged with that kind of advocacy? So let's get like boots on the ground, feet on the ground with what advocacy looks like in society with spiritual community. Oops, you're muted.
Yeah, somebody was knocking on my door,
Oh,
and I'm like, I can't let you in. I'm busy. I don't even know who it is. Uh, yeah, that's boots on the ground. Like what's happening here is, you know, if I speak truth and I don't do truth, then I'm silent. Like, what the heck is all this spiritual learning if I'm not going to actually put it to good use, to lift up humanity, right? To ease suffering, to, you know, to ensure that, the person next to me, has a sense of my big three things are safety, dignity, and belonging. Those are the three, you know, three driving principles for me in embodied anti-racism work, and any kind of work that's dismantling systems of oppression is safety, dignity, and belonging for each.
yeah.
And it's not how I define it; it's how the person in front of me. What does safety, dignity, and belonging mean to whoever's in front of me? So that's my sort of my um, the engine in my car of boots on the ground. And what am I and what does that look like and where? And so in spiritual community, it's that, does finding out that someone needs something, and um, am I stepping for, am I offering? We had one of the churches I served, we made this ginormous giving tree, with construction paper up on a huge wall. And, we built the trunk and the branches and stuff, but the leaves, there was two baskets of leaves, and they were, well, maybe there was more, but anyway, there were all these leaves. Yeah, it was two colors. And when you had something to offer to the community, like I I'm free on Thursdays and Fridays if someone needs a ride to the doctor's office. And you wrote that on a leaf and you stuck it on like the right side of the tree. And then if you needed something, like can someone take me to the grocery store on Monday? You picked the other color leaf and you wrote that and you stuck it on the left side of the tree. So over time, the tree got filled up with these different leaves. And what the invitation to everybody was to do both, right? Go put up something that you're willing to offer, and willing to offer with a glad heart, right? If there's no joy or meaning in what you're offering, then don't offer it, right? Find what is yours, your passion, and you offer it there. And look over what people are needing. Find the one that brings you joy and gladness. You can do with a smiling heart, and do that. And it was fabulous. Like it was always changing. Um,
I love that. I love that. And it, to me, it's the balance of power, right? The balance of advocacy and giving and receiving, and being real clear about what am I willing to do, and also what do I need, because we are all both, right? We all
yeah,
have something to give. And even if it's a phone call.
yes. And it was the things that people, that was getting people to write on the leaf of what they needed was the harder part, because we have a culture that says, is rugged individualism, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right?
Mhm.
Um, so, actually one time somebody wrote a leaf that said, I need new bootstraps, with a laughing face. I mean, they were obviously joking, but
Right.
it was
What comes to me though about that, though, I think in some, it's hard. Yes, it's hard to say I need something, but also it's not always just because I don't want anyone to go out of their
yeah,
way for me. There's also because it makes me accountable. If I
yes,
ask for something, I have to be willing to receive it, and then I can no longer
yes,
complain that I don't have that thing or
correct.
opportunity. And so if you're really attached to your neediness, then having an opportunity to be accountable to being willing to receive and solve this issue
Yeah.
can sometimes be the growth area.
Yeah.
And so that's beautiful on many different levels.
Well, it's part of the self mastery
Yes, yes.
and
And
learning
spiritual
to
evolution,
advocate for
maturity.
yourself.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So our format, as those of you who have been coming know, is that the second Thursday format is more of a lecture, informational style. You get a homework assignment, and then we come back on the fourth Thursday, and we don't record that session, and it's more of a discussion. So Kelly has agreed to come back to our next one, so that we can really engage in that. But I also, it's like not lost on me that having a conversation about power and advocacy and not letting anyone else talk in that conversation doesn't feel good to me. So I do want to give some space and just kind of open the mics, keeping in mind that it is still recording, and it will be, posted on the USCR website. And so board members or congregants or, colleagues will have access to it. But I do want to just, if there's anything that is coming up for you or that you want us to bookmark to make sure that we bring back at the next session, I just want to open the floor. Christy.
Thank you. Thank you so much for opening up this space and inviting me. This means a lot. I am in Tulsa and am newly minted on the board there. And I feel like when people talk about intersectionality, I feel like that has become my life. I am the intersection of the intersection of the intersection in the place in the world that is the intersection. There's a lot of stuff happening, particularly with the trans community, and I happen to be married to a Black trans female. So if you saw my face light up when you mentioned that, it was like, yep, that is real. And so my life has become a big part of, you know, the struggles of that community splashing over to me also as a trans spouse, filling that place of there are other people that are going through the transition, and so advocating in that regard. And then a huge part of my mission, my intersectionality, if you will, is mental health. And I personally, and I've had a couple of conversations, both online and in, IRL, about the language, and myself finding certain things very triggering. And for me, triggering doesn't mean, oh, well, I feel uncomfortable. Triggering means I go into fight or flight, and I no longer can even be a part of this conversation. And so trying to, in a with limited bandwidth, like, hey, just so you know, these terms can be very heavy-handed. They have gathered weight along the way, and I find that some of the terms have even been weaponized. And so I think that is a conversation, because I definitely understand, like, if you can't name it, if and the unity trend towards, not wanting to talk about things or backing away from power. So I absolutely get that. But as a person in that mental health space, just, I think maybe that might be an interesting topic for, kind of the closed conversation, or maybe even for the, the homework, is like, how, especially because there's a lot of people that deal with mental health in the advocacy arena. And so I have advocated for more nuanced conversations and more personal conversations. It's so easy to paint with a really broad brush, especially to somebody who looks like me. And also who can come in with a lot of power, on a good day. Leo sun, Pluto in the first house, like, I am there until I'm not. And then, you know, back in the day, lifetimes ago, I was married to someone who is very much into social justice. And I found myself in a domestic violence situation with them. So I think that there are other pieces of this. You know, it's treat everybody with exceptional kindness because you never know what kind of battle they've been in. So I have no answers for anything. I'm just muddying up the water.
Yeah,
I
me
love
neither.
it.
Thanks.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. You touched on a lot. I mean, mental health, weaponized language, nuanced conversations, all of those things. And, you know, I, I love that I have witnessed in unity communities, very specifically, that there is a shift, and I think it's reflective of what's happening in society too. That there is a shift. There are people who are really wanting to um, be clear about what we mean when we say a positive spiritual practice, that it's not all unicorns and fairies, that we're not going to bypass life and just pretend that everything is positive on Sundays and great. But that the message itself is positive as opposed to damning. Um, and that we are willing to mature as a movement. And that means that will require each of us to mature spiritually as individuals, which means we have to bring the intersection of everything together with our spiritual practice. I think, Kelly, tell me what you think about this, because we didn't talk about like what would be a good homework assignment. But I think for each of us to spend real time. And if you want to do it daily or weekly, well, it's only 2 weeks till we meet again. So at least 4 times. That's the assignment, but you could do more for extra credit. And Kelly, I don't grade the assignments, um, but I always offer extra credit, um, to really sit with yourself and the word power and to feel what comes up in your body. And your mind is part of your body, your brain is literally part of your body. But don't just get stuck in your mind or in your feeling space, which is your body also, but where literally in your body are you feeling the word power? And make notes about that, and you can share as much or as little about that, specifically as you want. But I'm more interested in what happens between now and then, with your relationship with that word. What do you think about that, Kelly? Anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's good. In fact, I have, if you want, I have a bunch of questions that I've used
Yes. Yes.
um,
Yeah. If you're willing to
around
share.
power. So I'll put that in the chat if you want,
Okay. That would
or
be
I'll email
awesome.
it to you.
Because I think that's where the rubber meets the road. And as unity leaders, which you all are, we have to do the work, and we have to do it. In order to lead the way, we have to be willing to do it ourselves. I mean, um, and now more than ever. And I'm sure every generation says that. But really, now more than ever, it is a matter of life and death. It is a matter of our survival, not just as a movement, but as people. And we have to be willing to really dig in deep. And that's mind, body, and soul with our teachings, because they are transformational. They are powerful and power filled teachings. Um, but we have to be willing to do the work. And Kelly, like you shared, that we sit with these amazing teachings and oftentimes just dig in this deep. um, and I do want to honor that there are communities who are really getting in deeper with it. And for those communities, there's not a roadmap, and so there's a lot of just exploring and trying, and which means you're going to make mistakes. um and it's so easy for all of us to just go back to what is tried and true. And the easy thing is just to dismiss power and anger as a bad thing and as negative energy, and it makes us sick. And all the things and power structures that we see across millennia around the world, and that, well, we just don't want to participate, that we want peace, love, and joy. And we can get peace, love, and joy, but we can only do it by really working with these words and with these teachings, and really understanding that anger has a place, and for good reason. Rage has a place and for good reason. Power has a place and for good reason. And to truly use it for good, that requires using it. So let's look at these questions. Share your relationship with power. What comes to mind? So I'm going to copy and paste that. And would you guys like me to email that out to you, or are you all able to? I can email that. I will do that. If I can find a place. Let's see. There we go. It's not. Let me try a different method. I'm just going to take a picture. My copy paste is not working for some reason. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kelly, for joining us and for offering your wisdom and your experience and your heart and sharing so authentically. It's always a joy to be with you in conversation.
Thanks. You're very welcome. Anytime.
And thanks to all of you for being here. I wish you a power-filled 2 weeks. And for those of you who will be at convention, we'll see you next week. And for those who won't, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bring a friend.
Yeah.
Jackie, I emailed you the questions too. So
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I will send those out to everyone. All right.
James.
Blessings. I love you. Bye.